SIL hated me for years and wore white to my wedding while criticizing everything I did. When I visited my sick mom, she called CPS to take my daughter, and it turned out she wanted custody of her. I've been with my husband, Harry, for almost 3 years now, and I absolutely adore his family. His mom is super sweet and caring, and his dad has always been really welcoming, making me feel like part of the family right from the start. When Harry and I first started dating, we broke up for a few months because of some misunderstandings. But when we got back together, his dad was the most excited to hear that we had worked things out. There's just one person in his family who hasn't really warmed up to me, and that's his older sister, Sarah. Since I began dating Harry, things with Sarah have always been a bit awkward. I've heard from other girls that dating guys with sisters can sometimes bring about a weird power dynamic, but I never really got to experience it until I met Harry. When Sarah was cold to me, I tried not to let it get to me too much, especially since I got along so well with the rest of Harry's family. Harry eventually explained to me why his sister was so possessive of him. Growing up, their mom's health was pretty bad, and she was in and out of hospitals a lot. Their dad was really preoccupied with taking care of their mom, so Sarah, being the older sibling, felt responsible for Harry. She took on this motherly role, making sure he did his homework, cooking for him, and always reminding him that she was his second mom. She even had this rule where Harry couldn't hang out with any girls without her permission. She'd constantly check up on him, sometimes even interfering in his relationships, which led to several breakups because his exes couldn't handle her nosiness. As they got older and their mom's health improved, Harry started to become more independent. He didn't feel the need to get his sister's permission for everything anymore. Sarah didn't like this change at all, and even went as far as installing a tracking app on his phone. There was this one time she showed up at a party he was attending with his friends and made a scene because he didn't invite her. This led to a huge argument, and Harry found out about the tracking app. He told their parents, and Sarah got a severe scolding. When Harry first told me about all of this, I honestly thought about breaking up with him and escaping all the drama. I mean, it wasn't normal at all, but I loved him, and I couldn't judge him based on his sister's actions. He was a victim in all this too, so I decided to stick around, but made a mental note to be really careful around Sarah from then on. In Harry's family, there's a strong tradition of having family dinners every couple of weeks, and for every holiday without fail. These dinners rotate between different family members' homes, and it's during these gatherings that Sarah and I mostly interact because otherwise, she never bothers to call me, though I don't mind. When we meet, I try to be as polite as possible, but she often makes comments or taunts that seem harmless at first glance, but are actually quite mean. For example, after we finish eating, I usually offer to do the dishes while Harry and his dad clear the table. Sarah sometimes helps if she feels like it. One evening, as I was tackling a mountain of dishes, Sarah came over and remarked, "Yeah, after how much you ate during dinner, you should clean all these dishes to lose some extra calories." It really hurt because it felt like she was fat-shaming me, even though I'm not fat. Her comment struck a nerve, and I snapped back, saying maybe she should help too, because it looked like she had put on some holiday weight. Sarah immediately started yelling at me for being insensitive. When Harry, his mom, who I call Mill, and his dad, Phil, rushed over, she accused me of calling her fat, which I never did. I denied it, and since no one backed her up, she stormed off. She later texted me, demanding an apology, but I refused, believing I hadn't said anything wrong. Since then, Sarah's been even ruder to me when no one's around. When Sarah was getting married to her then-boyfriend, Neil, she announced at a family event that she wanted everyone to keep their Christmas dates open because her wedding was going to be around that time. I didn't pay much attention because I had already decided not to attend unless I was free. Later, during dinner, while we were discussing trivial things, Sarah loudly asked if I still planned on visiting my family at the end of the year. My family and I always try to go on a trip together since we live far apart and rarely get to see each other. I replied calmly that yes, I would be visiting my family. Sarah then questioned if I was planning to skip her wedding. I assured her that attending her wedding wasn't an issue, but I needed to know the date in advance to coordinate with my family plans since I only see them once a year. Sarah wasn't satisfied with my answer and accused me of being selfish and not thinking about other people. She raised her voice, saying that this was why she never liked me. I tried to explain that I just needed to know the date before committing, but she kept accusing me of being ungrateful for everything her family had done for me. Her voice grew louder, and it was clear everyone around us was uncomfortable. Trying to calm things down, my mother-in-law intervened, reminding Sarah that I hadn't outright declined her invitation. So, here's what went down. I had these long-standing plans with my family, and it just wasn't fair for anyone to expect me to cancel them, especially when my family gets together every month throughout the year. Despite everything, Sarah was still super pissed, but eventually she let it go. Later on, Harry, my partner, told me that what I did was totally wrong. He said I should have dropped my family plans altogether for Sarah's wedding. I was like, wait a minute, I never asked you to come to any of my family events, so why are you trying to force me to go to your sister's wedding when she clearly hates me? Harry argued that it was my actions that made Sarah hate me, and that I should resolve things with her to prevent it from affecting our relationship. Feeling pressured and wanting to avoid more drama, I sent Sarah a text apologizing for any misunderstandings and canceled my plans with my family. It was a tough call, but I hoped it would smooth things over with Harry's family. To my utter surprise, though, Sarah's wedding never even happened that Christmas, despite all the drama and chaos over her disagreement. Her marriage plans fizzled out due to financial constraints. She ended up having a small courthouse wedding next year with a tiny reception in her backyard. I was so mad at her for creating all this drama over nothing. I had canceled all my plans for her non-existent wedding, and as a result, I decided not to attend her backyard reception. Harry tried to insist that I should go, but I had enough of his sister's chaos and put my foot down. I also stopped going to their monthly family dinners, deciding to only show up for special holidays. I would ask Harry to go alone most of the time. He would go, but always came back complaining about how bored he was without me. Eventually, he stopped attending so many family events. I don't think it was entirely because of me, but after we moved in together, his priorities changed, as they naturally do for anyone. Sarah started calling Harry, asking why he wasn't attending this dinner or that event, and he'd tell her he was too tired or busy with work. Then I started hearing from Harry's cousins that Sarah was spreading rumors, blaming me for Harry's absence, saying I was stopping him from seeing his family, which was totally not true. I asked Harry to clear things up with her because I didn't want to be the scapegoat. He agreed, and during the next family event, he confronted Sarah. I wasn't involved in their conversation, but from what I heard later, it turned into a huge argument. Sarah accused me of being abusive towards Harry and claimed she saw a pattern of narcissistic behavior in me over the years. She said I was isolating Harry from his family, painting me as manipulative and controlling. Harry defended me, explaining that I always encouraged him to participate in family events. But Sarah dismissed it, saying he was being manipulated and couldn't see it. She hurled insults at me, questioning my character and suggesting Harry deserved better. Despite Harry's attempts to reason with her and defend our relationship, Sarah became even more angry. She accused him of being blinded by love and unable to see that I was supposedly using him for his money and looks. The confrontation left Harry really shaken up, and he came back home to tell me he was done with his sister. For months, he blocked her and didn't let his parents guilt him into talking to her. However, things changed when we found out from relatives that Sarah was pregnant. His parents staged an intervention, pleading with Harry to mend things with Sarah before she gave birth. Harry had no choice but to agree. He started having lunches with Sarah, and they talked things out. Everything seemed fine between them, but she never once apologized to me for the things she said. When I pointed that out to Harry, he told me to just let it go because she was going to be a mother soon and would hopefully grow up. I hoped that would be true, but after Sarah gave birth to her son Van, her neediness seemed to escalate. She started frequently calling Harry to babysit, saying that she and her husband needed to work to support the baby, and the least Harry could do as a brother was take care of his nephew. Harry was apprehensive about looking after an infant alone and often checked in with me first. Sometimes I'd agree, and we would babysit together, but Sarah's demands kept growing. It got to a point where it seemed like she expected Harry to fill the role of Van's father. But it wasn't just him looking after the baby. I was involved too, and I didn't want to give up all my free time for this. Eventually, I started declining to babysit, and whenever I did, Harry would also refuse, much to Sarah's frustration. It's important to note that I never told Harry he couldn't look after his nephew. I encouraged him to step up without relying on me all the time. However, Harry would justify his refusal by citing his lack of experience with infants. I'm sure Sarah blamed me for this too. She started manipulating Harry, guilt-tripping him by saying things like, "My kid really wants this," or "It would mean so much to so-and-so if you did this." She also threw out random dates, asking if we had plans without providing context, trying to trap us into agreeing to babysit. If Harry said we were free, She'd then tell him she had plans with her friends and would drop the baby off at our place, forcing us to babysit. When Harry and I were planning our wedding, Sarah never once called to congratulate us. However, during a family dinner where I was also in attendance, she demanded that Harry and I pay for a nanny to look after her son during the event because she wanted to enjoy herself without having to worry about the baby. So there was this whole situation with Sarah worrying about her son, Harry. Harry pretty much told her straight up that it wasn't our job to pay for her childcare. He even suggested she ask her husband's family for help. Sarah wasn't having it though. She said she didn't trust them enough to watch her kid. Then her husband Neil overheard, and they got into it. Neil thought she was being totally unreasonable and insisted his parents would happily help out for just one night. In another instance, while chatting with my mother-in-law about my wedding dress, I showed her some pictures. I was over the moon because the dress was like something out of my dreams. But then Sarah butted in, saying it was all a waste of money, and bragged about her courthouse wedding. My mother-in-law gently pointed out that Sarah didn't really have a choice because of her financial situation. Sarah got all defensive, claiming she could have had a fancier wedding but chose not to, so she wouldn't waste her husband's money. She then threw some shade my way, implying I wasn't making the same sacrifices. I calmly told her that Harry and I were splitting the wedding costs, so I was actually being practical. This really got under her skin, and she pouted for the rest of the night. When I went to Vegas for my bachelorette party with my friends, we had an absolute blast and shared a ton of pictures. Sarah later told my husband that I must have hooked up with someone because, according to her, no respectable woman would party that hard before her wedding. Ironically, her own brother had done the same for his bachelor party. At the rehearsal dinner, she brought it up again, saying I could have had a more low-key party at home. I shrugged it off, explaining that I loved Vegas, and since I was paying for it, I saw no problem with having some pre-wedding fun. On the morning of our wedding, my mother-in-law came to me, looking worried. Sarah had sent her a picture of her dress, which was off-white and almost looked like a wedding dress. I was furious. My mother-in-law showed me messages where she had asked Sarah not to wear it, but Sarah claimed she was already on her way and couldn't change. I didn't want to deal with it, so I asked Harry to handle it. Harry and his dad quickly sorted it out. His dad even went out to buy Sarah a new dress and insisted she change before coming to the wedding. Crisis averted, but I never really forgave her for that stunt. At the reception, Sarah accused me of being a controlling bride and said I was just jealous. I told her I was done with her drama and wasn't going to entertain her childish behavior anymore. Harry backed me up and told her off for being so insensitive. Sarah didn't expect him to take my side so strongly, and she ended up leaving the reception in tears. Her husband Neil apologized to me, saying he had also told Sarah not to wear that dress, but she insisted on it, which only confirmed my suspicions. After that, things between Sarah and me were pretty tense until my daughter Mary was born. Sarah seemed to soften and even apologized when she visited us at the hospital. She showed genuine interest in Mary, and Harry's family was thrilled that she was making an effort. I figured it was time to bury the hatchet, especially since our kids are cousins and should be close. Sarah and I started hanging out more so our kids could play together. We'd chat about life and our husbands, and she confided in me that she had been trying for another baby, hoping for a daughter. I tried to reassure her not to stress about the baby's gender. I did notice that during family events, Sarah would always hug and kiss Mary a lot, which made Mary uncomfortable and sometimes cry. I didn't think much of it at first. Then, recently, my mom got sick and was hospitalized. The plan was for Harry, my in-laws, and me to visit her. They would stay for 4 days, but I planned to stay for 2 weeks to support my dad and help with my mom's recovery. I wanted to take Mary, but since we'd be at the hospital a lot, I didn't want to expose her to germs. Harry would take care of her while we were gone. Harry and I were planning a trip, but our daughter tends to get bored easily. So, Harry suggested we ask his sister, Sarah, to help out for the 4 days we'd be away. To our surprise, she enthusiastically agreed to look after our daughter. Before we left, I gave Sarah a list of things our daughter is allergic to, and she assured me everything would be fine. As soon as we landed at our destination and were waiting to grab our luggage, I got a call from an unknown number. I figured it might be the hospital, so I answered. But to my shock, it was Child Protective Services, CPS, on the line. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. CPS wanted to know where we were and why we'd left our daughter with someone else. I told them we were visiting my sick mother and had arranged for our daughter to stay with Harry's sister. To my utter disbelief, CPS informed me that Sarah had filed a complaint against me for abandoning our child and was planning to fight for custody in court. Panic set in as I tried to explain that Sarah was my husband's sister and had agreed to care for our child while we visited my hospitalized mother. I handed the phone to Harry, hoping he could clear things up, but it was obvious that one of us would need to return home immediately to deal with these serious allegations in person. Phil and Mill, Harry's parents, were just as freaked out as we were and tried calling Sarah, but she completely ignored their calls. In the end, Harry had to book a last-minute flight back home, which cost us a fortune since tickets were super expensive. I stayed behind with his parents to see my mother, as we didn't have any other choice. The whole situation was incredibly stressful, and I couldn't relax until Harry called to say he had reached home safely and that our daughter was perfectly okay. Hearing that, I broke down. On one side, my mother was in the hospital, and on the other, my sister-in-law tried to take my child away from me. Harry's parents and I kept pressing him for answers about why Sarah would file such a false report. Harry reassured us that he would address all our concerns once we got back home. Still, staying with my mom for a week under such distress was too much, so I decided to fly back with Phil and Mill in 4 days. I'm filled with anger and frustration towards Sarah, and I can't understand what drove her to call CPS on us. If I ever see her again, I'm afraid I might lose my temper, despite Harry's reassurances that I'll understand everything once I'm back. I feel like he's not taking this as seriously as he should, and that just adds to my confusion and frustration. Am I wrong for thinking what Sarah did was unforgivable? Update 1. It's been 4 days since my last update, and I'm finally heading back home today. Without going into medical details, my mother is slowly recovering, though she's still hospitalized. Once I confirm that our daughter is doing well, I might consider returning, depending on how things go with my family. I'll keep you guys updated. Also, regarding my husband's ability to care for our child, he's grown into a wonderful father, despite not having much parenting experience early on. He treats our daughter with so much love and care. Please don't blame him for this mess with CPS. Phil and Mill have tried everything to get in touch with Sarah and her husband, but they aren't answering their calls, which seems really odd. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and you all have been messaging and commenting like crazy, asking for more information. First of all, calm down. My husband and our daughter are safe. Nothing bad happened. When we all finally sat down to talk, Harry explained what happened. He told us the reason we couldn't get in touch with Sarah was because she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. We were all shocked, and Em looked particularly worried as Harry laid out the details. Apparently, Sarah had been obsessed with having a daughter, which I kinda knew. But what I didn't realize was that she saw our trip as a chance to fulfill her desire. She planned on taking us to court for custody of our daughter. She even told her husband Neil about it, but he thought she was joking because no sane person would think of something like that. Still, she went ahead and filed the complaint, and Harry had to rush back home to clear things up with CPS. After verifying all the details, CPS warned Sarah about filing false complaints in the future. Harry then confronted Sarah, unable to believe she'd do such a thing to us. She tried justifying her actions, saying she'd watched me with our daughter and thought I wasn't a good mother because I didn't kiss or hug my kid enough. She claimed that our daughter always cried or got uncomfortable whenever she held her, making Sarah think I was abusing her in private. Harry was furious and told her that her behavior was anything but normal and that she was getting too obsessed with our daughter. Sarah kept insisting she deserved our child, but Harry pointed out how wrong she was to call CPS on her own family without any proof. After hours of talking, Sarah finally broke down and admitted she wasn't in the right state of mind and needed help. She confessed to fantasizing about stealing our kid away from us because she couldn't have one of her own. I've always wanted a daughter, and even her husband Neil was taken aback by how much she was struggling. In the end, Harry and Neil had a really heartfelt conversation, and Neil packed a bag for Sarah so he could drive her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. That's why she hasn't been around the past few days. Neil apologized to my in-laws for not answering their calls, explaining that he wanted to clear everything up in person. Since then, Van has been staying with us for the time being. I know Neil works long hours, and I didn't want Van to be alone in the house, so we've welcomed him into our home to ensure he has company and support during this tough time. Now that everything's out in the open, I understand why my sister-in-law called CPS and why my husband waited until now to explain everything. It's a lot to take in, and honestly, I'm at a loss for words myself. Update 3. Wow, my post has gone viral. I took all of your advice and had a talk with my husband. He's agreed to get a restraining order against my sister, even though she's getting treatment for her mental health issues. I'm really scared of leaving my child behind next week when I visit my parents, but my husband and in-laws have assured me they'll make sure nothing happens to my kid. I also feel really guilty that I haven't spent enough time with my parents, especially with my mom being sick. Hopefully, this time, I can spend some quality time with my dad and be there to support and watch over my mom as she continues her recovery journey.